Check her bag. She's probably hiding something in that tote. Those were the words that shattered the silence in the most exclusive boutique on Madison Avenue. A simple woman in linen walked in to buy a necklace, but what she got was humiliation, profiling, and public shame. What the staff didn't know? Her husband was one of the most powerful billionaires in America. What followed wasn't just poetic justice, it was a global reckoning. From quiet humiliation to a movement that rewrote corporate policies, Naomi Ellis didn't just walk out with a $12 million diamond necklace. She walked out with a mission that would change history. And she did it all without shouting, just by refusing to shrink. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much. And now, let's get back to the story. Keep an eye on her, the saleswoman whispered, not even trying to lower her voice. That kind doesn't come to buy. She comes to steal. Naomi Ellis paused mid-step. The words weren't just cruel. They were meant to pierce, to slice into the air like a well-aimed dagger. And they did. A hush fell over the polished marble floors of Madison Avenue, the most exclusive jewelry boutique on Madison Avenue. Beneath its towering crystal chandeliers and velvet-lined displays of emeralds, sapphires, and flawless diamonds, Naomi suddenly felt smaller than her linen dress could ever make her seem. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly turned toward the woman behind the glass display, her expression unreadable. The woman, tall, sharp-jawed, wrapped in a black silk sheath dress, smiled without warmth. A name tag glittered on her chest, Brittany Crane. Her updo was sculpted with more precision than the boutique's tiara settings, and her eyes roamed over Naomi's plain sandals and bare face like a scanner designed to detect the undesirables. Naomi had heard the words. Everyone had. Still, she said nothing. She simply turned her head toward the center of the boutique, where a spotlight beamed down like divine light on the pink diamond, a breathtaking, 18-carat centerpiece nestled among flawless white diamonds. The crown jewel of Maison Elitaire, price tag, $12 million. No financing, no returns, no photos unless you were invited. She had come to see it. Just see it, feel its weight. Mark her 10th anniversary in her own quiet way. The rest she thought could wait. But Brittany was already walking toward her, heels clicking like a gavel in a courtroom where Naomi didn't belong. The boutique's other clients, cloaked in Chanel, Balmain, and Tom Ford, had begun circling like wolves pretending to be swans. One of them, a woman with platinum blonde hair and a fur-trimmed coat draped over her shoulders despite the spring warmth, leaned toward her companion. "Oh my God," she said, eyes locked on Naomi. Did she wander in from a yoga retreat? Or did the farmer's market let out early? Her name was Isabel Chase, and Naomi knew her by reputation alone. Socialite, reality TV darling, and the kind of woman who fed on public shaming like it was caviar. Her friend, some hedge fund type with teeth too white to be real, chuckled darkly. No appointment, no diamond, bold. Laughter danced through the boutique like wind chimes strung from contempt. Naomi approached the central display with measured steps, each sandal whispering against the floor. The diamond's light caught the gold flecks in her eyes. She wasn't here for them. She wasn't here to make noise. She wasn't here to prove herself, but Brittany made it clear she wasn't welcome. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice clipped and edged with something uglier than doubt. Naomi nodded politely. "I'd like to see the pink diamond necklace, please." Brittany didn't hide the smirk that played on her lips. "That's a showcase piece," she said, loud enough for the entire boutique to hear. "We don't present it to window shoppers." A few gasps. A stifled chuckle. Naomi's hand brushed the edge of her tote, feeling for the old photo tucked inside. A picture of her and Julian laughing on the beach in Montauk, taken 10 years ago on the day they promised they'd never let money define them. "I understand," Naomi said softly. "I'd still like to see it. I can afford it." Brittany's laugh rang out, sharp as breaking glass. "Oh, I'm sure you think you can," she said, leaning forward, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you even know how much it costs? Or are you just here for the air conditioning?" A nearby client, sipping champagne from a crystal flute, almost choked. Isabel looked over, eyes alight with cruel amusement. "Maybe she thought this was a clearance sale," Isabel murmured, "or a museum." Naomi stayed silent. Her pulse thudded, not with shame, but with the sting of betrayal, as though all her years of staying under the radar, of choosing grace over glamour, had somehow failed her in this moment. Behind the counter, another employee, Jason Miller, leaned in with a grin. "You might want to keep an eye on her bag," he whispered to Brittany, intentionally loud enough for others to hear. "I've seen that kind before. Classic distract and grab tactic." The word thief was never said outright, but it didn't have to be. Naomi's fingers gripped the canvas handle of her tote a little tighter. A child would have run. A weaker woman might have screamed. But Naomi? She inhaled deeply, stepped back from the glass, and walked slowly toward the exit. Not because she was giving up, but because she needed to breathe. Then she felt it. A shadow stepped in her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," said a voice. "I need to see inside that bag." It was Victor, the boutique's head of security. Thick arms, tactical boots, radio crackling on his belt. His voice echoed through the store like a fire alarm. Naomi turned, stunned. "What? You've been acting suspicious," he said. "Please open your tote, now." The crowd stopped pretending not to watch. Phone cameras tilted up. Jason crossed his arms. Brittany folded hers. Isabel whispered to her followers, "We're about to see a live bust." Naomi slowly opened her tote, a notebook, a pen. A single granola bar. And that worn photo of her and Julian, creased but cherished. Victor scanned the contents, then nodded. "Keep it where I can see it." A few patrons clapped mockingly. Isabel tossed a coin that hit the marble with a sharp ring. "For your bus fare, sweetheart," she said. "Don't spend it all in one place." Naomi's throat burned, but she didn't speak. Not yet. She refused to give them her voice, her rage, or her pain. Instead, she walked, quietly, slowly, toward the boutique's glass doors. The cameras followed. Outside, the sun was dazzling. Tourists strolled past, oblivious to the humiliation she had just endured. She leaned against a nearby stone column, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. He answered on the second ring. "Naomi," came Julian's voice, warm, steady, and laced with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft but strong. "They wouldn't show me the necklace." A pause. A silence that hummed like a live wire. "I'll be there in 30, Julian said. "Stay close. I'm bringing the storm." Naomi tucked the phone back into her tote and closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't fume. She simply waited, because she knew the people inside that boutique had made one fatal miscalculation. They thought the woman in linen was alone. They had no idea who was coming. "She's definitely up to something," Brittany muttered, her voice thick with disdain. Classic distraction tactic. Jason leaned closer to the counter, polishing a tray of platinum rings with theatrical precision. Bet she thought Maison Elitaire was a pop-up flea market. Their laughter rolled like thunder behind glass. But Naomi Ellis had already stepped outside. Her sandals whispered against the sidewalk, her linen dress catching the late-morning breeze like a quiet flag of resistance. She found a bench a few feet away beneath a blooming magnolia tree and sat, folding her hands over her canvas tote like a chapel prayer. She had made it through without yelling, without crying, without handing them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But the world was only just beginning to feast. Inside the boutique, Isabel Chase, queen of social pettiness, uploaded the first video, a 30-second clip of Naomi being confronted by Victor. The caption, "Shoplifter or just lost, linen lady Maison Elite fails." In moments, it was shared to their private group chat, Maison Queens, then reposted to Instagram stories, TikTok, and eventually a niche gossip site. Another video quickly followed, Naomi standing by the diamond display, Jason eyeing her tote, followed by her calm exit as coins bounced at her feet. Each post came with a more mocking title. "No diamonds for discount Donna. She thought this was Macy's. When the farmer's market girl hits Madison Ave." Within hours, the footage hit 30,000 views, then 50,000, then 100,000. Naomi, sipping coffee at a nearby cafe as she waited for Julian, didn't even know she'd become the internet's newest punchline, until a stranger at the next table leaned to her companion and whispered, "That's her. The woman from the video." Naomi's fingers tightened around the cup. The coffee had gone cold. Back inside Maison Elitaire, Brittany flicked through her notifications with a giddy grin. "Going viral," she said, tapping her phone. Even Lauren Tate reposted it. Jason laughed. "Linen Girl's 15 minutes of shame." They didn't notice the valet outside had stopped what he was doing. Didn't see the black Rolls-Royce Phantom glide to a stop. Didn't see the chauffeur jump out first, smoothing his jacket and rushing to open the passenger door with the reverence of someone who knew who he was serving. And they certainly didn't see Julian Ellis, 6'2", tailored black suit, dark hair brushed back like a storm barely held in place, step out into the sunlight. The sidewalk hushed as he moved. Like even the city knew something seismic was about to happen. Julian Ellis didn't rush. That was never his way. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Inside, Isabel Chase was posting another TikTok, laughing into the camera about how some people just don't belong in luxury spaces. She had no idea who had just walked past the boutique's glass doors. Julian entered like he owned the place, because in a way, he could have. Ellis Commerce, the empire he built from a single shipping algorithm, now powered half of North America's online retail. He'd been on the cover of Forbes, spoken at Davos, dined with presidents. But almost no one had seen him in person. His was the kind of quiet power that echoed without introduction. And when the staff finally looked up, they saw the storm they'd summoned. Brittany went pale. Jason dropped the ring he was holding. Even Victor, the security guard, stepped back slightly, radio buzzing awkwardly on his belt. Behind Julian, Naomi stepped inside. Same linen dress, same tote, same unbothered grace. Gasps swept the room like a cold wind. Julian's voice was low, steady, each word measured with the precision of someone who didn't need to raise his tone to split mountains. Is the employee who insulted my wife still working here? You could have heard a necklace drop. Mr. Raphael Verona, the boutique owner, came sprinting from his office on the mezzanine level, his blazer skewed, hair rumpled, face pale as pearl. Mr. Ellis, he stammered. Sir, this is all a misunderstanding. Julian's eyes, sharp and green, didn't even blink. You let your staff accuse my wife of theft, he said slowly, surgically. You let them mock her, film her, humiliate her in front of your clients. Verona looked at Brittany. She was trembling. Her updo had started to collapse. Her voice vanished before it could form words. Julian didn't stop. You told her she didn't belong, that she wasn't welcome, he said, each sentence a judgment. You tried to reduce her to the clothes she wore, the bag she carried. Naomi stepped forward now, placing a calm hand on Julian's arm. She looked straight at Verona. I never needed them to know who I was, she said quietly. I just needed to be treated like a human being. The words sank into the velvet air like iron weights. Julian turned to his assistant, Leah, who had entered behind them with a slim leather tablet in hand. The necklace, he said. Leah nodded. Already queued, sir. Her fingers flew across the screen. In 30 seconds, a $12 million bank transfer was completed. The funds cleared in real time. Mr. Verona fumbled for the case, hands shaking as he opened the secured vault drawer and lifted the pink diamond necklace with shaking fingers. Julian took it, then gently stepped behind Naomi. The boutique held its breath. He placed the necklace around her neck with reverence, not as a display of wealth, but of affirmation. The diamonds glittered like falling stars. She doesn't have to ask anyone for permission now, Julian said softly. Not a single person moved. Not a phone was raised. Not a whisper dared disturb the gravity in the room. Then Julian turned to Mr. Verona one last time. She will never return here, he said, and neither will anyone in our circle. Mr. Verona nodded frantically. Understood. He turned to Brittany. His face was stone. You're fired. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Jason tried to retreat behind a display case. And you, Verona said, pointing, pack your things. Even Victor, once eager to display power, stood awkwardly by the exit, flank unsure whether to salute or disappear. The boutique that had once laughed at Naomi Ellis was now crumbling in real time. The video of Julian's arrival, captured by a paparazzo outside, hit the internet 5 minutes later. Within an hour, security footage leaked, showing Brittany's sneer, Isabel's coin toss, Victor's public bag check. Twitter exploded. Instagram Reels repeated Julian's words, now she doesn't have to ask. TikTok stitched the security footage with hashtags like #DiamondJustice, Linen Queen, and Maison Cancelled. Naomi, meanwhile, stepped out of the boutique into the sunlight once more. Same tote, same quiet dignity, but this time, the world saw her. And they didn't just see a woman in linen, they saw a revolution begin. Delete it, Isabel Chase barked at her assistant, her phone trembling in one manicured hand. delete every post, now. But it was too late. The footage of Naomi Ellis, poised, silent, regal in simplicity, being publicly humiliated at Maison Elitaire, had already scorched its way across the internet. The confrontation, the bag check, the cruel laughter, the diamond necklace moment. All of it was now digital scripture. Each second replayed by millions, each whisper now a scream on Twitter, each laugh an indictment on TikTok. And there was no redemption arc written for Isabel. Her video mocking Naomi, captioned, "When Linen Tries Luxury," had reached over 2.3 million views. The comments were unforgiving. "You're the reason people are scared to shop. This is why class doesn't come with character." Imagine laughing at someone just because they wear flat sandals. The same brands that once courted Isabel Chase were now ghosting her. Her agency dropped her within 24 hours. Invitations to Fashion Week events evaporated. Endorsement deals withdrew quietly, deleting her name from scheduled posts and wiping their hands of the toxicity she'd helped create. And Isabel, seated in her Upper East Side condo with blackout curtains pulled and designer mascara running down her cheeks, realized something terrifying. You can be rich, you can be famous, but you cannot survive a digital reckoning. Inside Maison Elitaire, Mr. Raphael Verona was in damage control mode. But damage control is hard when you're on fire and the fuel tank is your own brand. The boutique's Yelp page was now a war zone, 1-star reviews flooding in every minute. "Elitist garbage, will never shop here again. They judged her bag, now I'll never buy one from them. You don't deserve to polish her shoes." Even TripAdvisor had picked it up, with people leaving sarcastic reviews like, "Came for the diamonds, stayed for the classism. Staff are more toxic than a sewer pipe." Meanwhile, luxury PR firms refused to touch the story. One anonymous source told Vogue, "Maison Elitaire is radioactive. You stand too close, you glow, and not the good kind." Brittany Crane, the once feared queen of the boutique floor, became an overnight pariah. Her image, sneering behind the glass case, lips curled in disdain, was now a meme. When you sell $12 necklaces but can't sell basic decency. She tried to defend herself in a shaky Instagram live that barely lasted 5 minutes. I didn't know who she was," Brittany stammered, tears streaking her contour. She looked like she didn't belong." The comments were brutal. "That's the point. You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with respect. Your tears aren't diamonds, Brittany. No one's buying." The live ended with a shaky click. She disabled her comments. Then her account, then vanished. Jason Miller didn't even try to apologize. He simply stopped showing up for work. But the internet didn't stop showing up for him. His LinkedIn profile was roasted. Former co-workers leaked screenshots of Slack messages where he had mocked not only Naomi but several other clients he'd profiled over the years. His nickname among staff had been the Filter, because he could filter out the ones who can't afford. Within 2 days, luxury recruiters blacklisted him. One headhunter publicly posted, "We're not hiring walking liabilities." Even Victor, the security guard, received backlash. His overzealous bag check had become a GIF, looped 1,000,000 times. A podcast guest called him the bouncer at the gates of classism. Maison Elitaire had not only lost a sale, it had lost its soul. And Naomi? She didn't post a single word. No tweet, no clapback, no interview. She didn't have to, because the world had already taken up her cause. TikTok creators stitched her footage with tears in their eyes. This is what quiet dignity looks like. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. The way he put that necklace on her? Chills. The clip of Julian Ellis saying, "Now she doesn't have to ask anyone for permission," was now a viral sound. Users lip-synced it with reenactments, some comedic, others heartfelt. But all of them crowned Naomi not as a victim, but a queen. They called her the Linen Lady, the Tote Bag Titan, the Duchess of Dignity. Even brands began reacting. Burberry offered to gift Naomi a custom trench, which she respectfully declined. Elle ran a cover story, "Power and Simplicity, Naomi Ellis and the Rise of Elegant Resistance." But still, Naomi didn't speak. She didn't have to. She was planning something deeper. 3 days after the video hit 20 million views, Julian and Naomi sat together in the garden of their modest Brooklyn brownstone. He in a black polo and slacks. She in her now iconic linen dress. Her tote beside her, a tablet in her lap. "You sure you want to do this?" Julian asked, his hand resting gently over hers. Naomi looked up, her gray eyes calm. "I'm sure. The necklace made headlines," she said, "but I want something that makes change." And with that, she began drafting the charter for what would soon become the Elitaire Fund, a non-profit backed by the entire $12 million value of the necklace. Her mission? To fund programs for women facing discrimination in elite workplaces. To provide legal support for those profiled or mistreated. To teach luxury brands what respect truly looks like. And to ensure no woman, no matter her background, would be made to feel small again. Back in the wreckage of the influencer world, Lauren Tate, the tech heiress who'd piled onto Naomi online, was beginning to feel the ground give beneath her Louboutin heels. Her TikTok account had been suspended after multiple users flagged her mocking video for hate speech. Her investors, once enchanted by her edgy brand, began pulling out. Her startup lost over $20 million in projected funding in 48 hours. In a desperate attempt to save face, she issued a public apology. I got caught up in the moment," she said on Instagram Live, blinking into the camera like a deer on Fifth Avenue. "I didn't know it would cause so much pain. I didn't mean it. But like Britney's apology, it flopped. You didn't mean for you to feel consequences," one comment read. "Say it louder for the PR team watching in the back." Lauren's app was pulled from the App Store a week later. Her CEO title dissolved like sugar in hot tea. Meanwhile, Naomi's silence remained louder than any scandal. Letters began to arrive at her home. Handwritten, typed, printed from emails. Women from all over the country shared their stories. "I was laughed at in a boutique because I wore sneakers after chemo. They said my accent made me sound uneducated. I never went back to that store, but I saw your video, and I cried." Naomi read every letter. She placed them in a soft leather binder, one by one alphabetically. And with each word, her vision for the Elitaire Fund grew stronger. She would host summits, speak at universities, consult with fashion houses, lead change not through rage, but through undeniable integrity. Maison Elitaire tried to survive. They issued a press release. "We are committed to diversity and inclusion." They uploaded a slideshow of progressive hiring stats. They promised sensitivity training, but none of it mattered. Not when the Elitaire Fund, Naomi's brainchild, had already overtaken their brand online. Not when Naomi Ellis, the woman they mocked, had been profiled in the New York Times under the headline, "Grace Wears Linen." "Miss Ellis, please, just a few words?" A wave of cameras surged forward as Naomi stepped onto the stone steps of the Metropolitan Pavilion. Flashbulbs popped, microphones thrust closer. Reporters from the Times, CNN, Forbes, Hack and Elle crowded around her like moths to a light they had once ignored. But Naomi didn't blink. She stood still, a navy blue dress flowing softly around her knees, the now iconic canvas tote hanging from her shoulder. The tote that once sparked suspicion was now legend, a symbol of dignity and restraint in a world obsessed with labels and luxury. Naomi glanced at the crowd, offered a small grounded smile, and raised her voice, calm, unwavering. "Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Today we begin something new, something that's not about revenge, but about rewriting the rules of respect." And just like that, the first public launch of the Elitaire Fund was underway. Inside the pavilion, the air was electric, not with celebrity gossip, but with purpose. Rows of seats were filled with women from every walk of life. Corporate lawyers in pantsuits, cashiers in sundresses, single mothers in jeans and sneakers. No one asked about their bags. No one questioned their worth. Behind Naomi, a banner read, "The Elitaire Fund, where respect is not a luxury." Julian stood quietly in the wings, dressed simply in a gray sweater and slacks. He wasn't here to dominate the spotlight, only to support it. His eyes never left Naomi. As the event began, keynote speakers, many of them women who had experienced public humiliation, job discrimination, or retail profiling, shared their stories. Some trembled as they spoke. Others stood tall with newfound defiance. "I was laughed out of an interview because of my accent," said a Jamaican-American woman, her voice tight. "But after seeing Naomi, I applied again, and this time I got the job." Applause. Another woman, a former store associate from a luxury chain, confessed, "I was told to greet the real customers first. But I never forgot Naomi's face. I want to work somewhere that sees people, not just Prada." The room rose in standing ovation. Naomi took the stage again. I don't want to tear anyone down, she said, looking out across a sea of faces. But I do want to build something better. For every woman who's ever been told she doesn't look the part, wear the right heels, carry the right bag, I want her to know, you belong. Social media lit up instantly. Clips of the event flooded Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. She turned shame into change. Naomi Ellis isn't canceling, she's correcting. This is leadership. This is grace. The hashtag linen leadership trended within 2 hours. The tote that once got her searched was now mass-produced, with all proceeds funding scholarships for marginalized women in fashion, law, and business. Within the first week, 50,000 units sold out. And the necklace? The $12 million pink diamond? It had been donated, on permanent loan, to the National Museum of American History, encased under a plaque that read, "The Necklace of Dignity, in honor of Naomi Ellis and every woman who refused to shrink." Meanwhile, back on Madison Avenue, Maison Elitaire was crumbling from the inside. They tried to rebrand. Soft pastels, apology press tours. A new community engagement director was hired and fired within a week. Nothing stuck. The once glimmering boutique was now a hollow shell. Velvet cases stood empty. The scent of fresh roses had been replaced by the stale air of reputational decay. A junior staffer leaked an internal memo. Influencer partnerships canceled. Walk-ins down 80%. We are considering closure. And when news broke that the Elitaire Fund had partnered with Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, and even Gucci to deliver anti-discrimination training to all their floor employees, it became clear. Maison Elitaire wasn't just being boycotted. It was being replaced. The personal collapses of Naomi's former tormentors were just as swift. Brittany Crane, once the apex predator of luxury retail, now found herself jobless and blacklisted. Her fashion blog, rebranded under a pseudonym, was identified and dismantled by internet sleuths. When she applied for a position at a mid-tier accessories chain, the HR team turned her away before she finished her interview. "We don't have room for your kind of expertise," they said. Jason Miller, after several failed job applications, attempted to pivot into crypto. He ran a short-lived podcast titled Behind the Glass Case, What Retail Won't Tell You. It bombed. No one wanted his version of the story. His name was forever linked to the keyword elitist gatekeeper. And Victor, the security guard who demanded Naomi's bag be searched in front of dozens, faced his own reckoning. A video surfaced of him confronting a different woman, black, mid-40s, at a tech conference boutique that was years old but perfectly timed. The incident resurfaced with the caption, "Pattern of Power, when security becomes a weapon." Victor lost his license within days. And then there was Isabel Chase. Once the darling of Rodeo Drive, her posts now gathered more scorn than likes. After several botched apology videos and failed sponsorship pitches, she disappeared from Instagram for 2 weeks. When she returned, it was with a photo of her selling her once-famed fur coat at a consignment shop. The caption read, "Starting over. I hope you'll let me." The comments didn't. "Naomi started something better. You just got caught." One follower wrote, "She wore linen. You wore lies." Isabel's follower count plunged by half. Meanwhile, Naomi sat at her desk in the Elitaire Fund's new Midtown office, modest, sunlit, lined with photos from the first summit. Her tote rested on the back of her chair. Julian entered quietly, carrying a tray with 2 cups of chamomile tea. "She's here," he said. Naomi looked up. A young woman stepped in, maybe 25, wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. Her eyes brimmed with emotion. She carried a folded letter in hands that trembled. I wanted to thank you," she said. "Because of you, I walked out of a job where they laughed at my braids. I'm in law school now. Full scholarship. I owe that to what you did." Naomi's heart caught. "You don't owe me anything," she said, rising to embrace her. "You changed your own life. I just reminded you that you could." Outside, beneath the same blooming magnolia tree where Naomi once sat humiliated, a group of women gathered. They weren't crying, they were planning, sharing resources, telling their stories. The Elitaire Fund had become more than a response, it was a revolution. And Naomi? She never sought to be famous. She never needed to wear a crown or carry a branded bag. But the world had crowned her anyway, not with diamonds, but with respect. "I'm not here because of what I wore. I'm here because of what they saw when I wore it." Naomi's voice echoed across the Grand Assembly Chamber of the United Nations. Flags of every nation flanked the marble stage. Delegates from over 70 countries leaned forward in their seats. Interpreters whispered translations through headsets as the woman in the simple navy dress, no diamonds, no designer logos, spoke with a conviction that transcended fashion, wealth, or borders. I was labeled, shamed, mocked, and accused, Naomi continued, her hands resting lightly on the podium. But I was not broken. Because dignity, she paused, locking eyes with the room, is not up for sale. Thunderous applause followed. Cameras flashed, live streams exploded. It wasn't just a speech, it was a moment, one that would be replayed around the globe for years to come. Naomi Ellis, the woman who once stood humiliated in a boutique on Madison Avenue, had become the face of an international movement for respect, equity, the belief that every human being, regardless of appearance, class, or cultural background, deserved to be treated with basic human decency. Back in New York, the fallout for Maison Elitaire went from corporate embarrassment to full-blown catastrophe. What began as a social media scandal had now become a legal inferno. 3 weeks after Naomi's UN speech, the Elitaire Fund's legal team, backed by Monroe Ventures, filed a class action lawsuit against the boutique and its leadership. Over 40 former employees had come forward, providing sworn statements of discrimination and elitist indoctrination. We were told to greet anyone without a designer label last. We were trained to spot low-tier shoppers by their shoes and bags. Management had an internal blacklist called Clearance Vibe. Naomi's name was added the day she walked in. Court documents laid bare a system that had functioned like a caste hierarchy. The lawsuit cited racial profiling, class discrimination, emotional distress, and brand defamation. But the final blow came from the New York State Human Rights Commission, which launched an independent investigation. Their findings? Maison Elitaire had violated state and federal civil rights laws. Within days, they were slapped with a $10 million fine and an injunction that shuttered their flagship boutique indefinitely. News vans camped outside the now-closed glass doors, while workers removed the crystal chandeliers that once sparkled with exclusion. The necklace, the infamous $12 million pink diamond, had become more than a jewel. It was now a global artifact. After Naomi's donation to the National Museum of American History, the exhibit had become a pilgrimage site. School children visited it on field trips. Survivors of workplace harassment took photos in front of it, their heads held high. Women wore linen dresses in solidarity and posted their photos under the hashtag Naomi Taught Me. The plaque beneath the necklace read, "This piece once symbolized wealth. It now symbolizes strength." Curators confirmed it had become the museum's most visited modern artifact since the Rosa Parks bus. And Naomi? She refused to wear it again. When asked why in an interview, she simply replied, "It's not mine anymore. It belongs to the people." Naomi's mission continued to evolve. The Elitaire Fund expanded its reach, launching satellite programs in London, Nairobi, Mumbai, and São Paulo. Scholarships were awarded to women from underprivileged backgrounds seeking careers in fashion, law, business, and STEM. The fund's flagship program, the Mirror Initiative, partnered with over 300 luxury brands and corporations to implement dignity training and internal bias audits. Major companies, once hesitant, were now eager to align with Naomi's vision. She met with CEOs, she consulted on advertising campaigns, she reviewed hiring policies, but she never lost her essence. She still carried the same tote bag, still dressed in clean, elegant simplicity, still walked like a woman who'd never forgotten what it felt like to be looked down on. Meanwhile, Brittany Crane, once the darling of Maison Elitaire's sales floor, now worked at a strip mall bridal chain in Staten Island. Her former LinkedIn title, Luxury Retail Visionary, was replaced with Client Associate. She kept her head down, praying not to be recognized. Jason Miller left the retail world entirely. Last Naomi had heard, he was managing inventory at a shipping warehouse in New Jersey. A friend had sent her a screenshot of a Reddit post where someone asked, "Is this the same guy who mocked Naomi Ellis?" The comments had been savage. Victor, the security guard, had been banned from private contracting gigs across Manhattan. Word had spread, "Don't hire the man who humiliated the woman who changed the world." Isabel Chase tried to stage a comeback with a reality show pilot about influencer redemption. The network canceled it after the trailer was bombarded with dislikes. We don't want a redemption arc, we want accountability. Her empire was gone, her legacy was humiliation. And yet, Naomi never gloated. She never posted revenge threads, never mentioned names in speeches. When asked about them in a press Q&A, she said only this: "I wish them peace. I really do. Because I know what it's like to live in a world built on judgment. I just decided I wouldn't stay there." On the one-year anniversary of the necklace incident, the Elitaire Fund hosted a candlelight event in Central Park. Thousands showed up, each person carrying a small candle and a story. They lit their candles one by one. For every time I was underestimated. For every job I was denied because I didn't look the part. For every moment I stayed quiet because I thought I wasn't enough. And as the sun set over the New York skyline, Naomi stood among them. Not on a stage, not above anyone, but shoulder to shoulder, candle in hand. Julian held her other hand, and they smiled. Not the smile of triumph, but of peace. The same reporters who once ignored her now followed every step of her journey. But Naomi never acted like a public figure. She still replied to handwritten letters, still personally reviewed every scholarship application, still kept the faded photo of her and Julian, taken on the beach 10 years ago, in her tote bag. The boutique that once tried to reduce her to a joke was now a footnote. The necklace that once defined their status now defined her legacy. And the woman who walked into a store dressed in linen, she walked into history. "She's cute," the creative director smirked, flipping through mock-ups at the Paris atelier. "But she's not couture, she's cotton." The boardroom chuckled. Polished nails tapped espresso cups, fabrics shimmered beneath soft gallery lights. And yet, there was something hollow in the laughter, like glass about to crack. The man speaking was Lucien Delacour, heir to the century-old French fashion house Maison Delacour, a brand as exclusive as it was archaic. They had dressed queens and presidents' wives. They prided themselves on preserving elegance from dilution. And now, they were discussing their upcoming campaign, and whether or not to address the Elitaire Fund and Naomi Ellis directly. "I say we nod to it," Lucien continued, twirling a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers. "A little wink in our spring show, satire, irony, maybe open with a girl in a linen dress and flip-flops trying to walk the runway, something tasteful." The others laughed harder this time. They didn't realize a storm was forming outside their ivory tower, because just 3 blocks away, Naomi Ellis was stepping out of a taxi into a sea of flashing lights and heading into Paris Fashion Week as the guest of honor. The invitation had come quietly, respectfully, and unanimously from 3 of the most progressive design houses, Maison Bellevaux, Rowan Rose, and Kyoko Atelier, all of whom had signed on to Naomi's Mirror initiative and had seen their stock and global goodwill soar. Their CEOs personally welcomed Naomi to the event, not as a novelty, not as a gesture, but as a voice of reckoning. Dressed in a hand-stitched navy silk gown designed by a scholarship recipient from the Elitaire Fund's Nairobi program, Naomi entered the Grand Palais with poise that silenced even the most jaded photographers. There was no pink diamond necklace, no bodyguards, just the tote, still with her, still constant. And as she sat front row at Rowan Rose's show, flanked by UN delegates, former diplomats, and global businesswomen, the cameras shifted. Naomi wasn't the story anymore. She was the standard. Lucien's show was scheduled for the following night. The entire team at Maison Delacour had spent weeks preparing. Their theme, elegance against the grain. The first look, a painfully thin model in exaggerated linen, oversized glasses, and a parody of a canvas tote stamped with "I don't belong here." The crowd at the rehearsal tittered. "It's satire," Lucien repeated to himself. "The internet will love it." But the internet was already watching. And it was not amused. Someone had leaked a photo from the dress rehearsal, the tote prop clearly visible, the caption "opening look" carelessly shared by a junior stylist. Within 2 hours, Twitter was ablaze. They're mocking the woman who started a revolution? Maison Delacour, where pettiness is sewn into every seam. They laughed at the woman who made them relevant. The hashtag Delacour disrespect trended before the show even started. And that night, Naomi, invited but not obligated to attend, arrived not in protest but in peace. When the show began, cameras turned not to the models, but to her. And when the parody model walked out, the linen exaggerated, the tote mocking, the room went dead silent. Not a laugh. Not a breath. Naomi didn't flinch. She simply leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand. The audience followed her lead, and when the show ended, she stood, walked out, didn't say a word. But the world did. By morning, Delacourt's show was a global embarrassment. TikTok creators reenacted Naomi's composed reaction to the mockery, dubbing it the silent roast heard round the world. Instagram flooded with side-by-sides, Naomi's real linen dress worn with grace, Delacourt's costume dripping in sarcasm. The verdict? They had to spend millions to mock one woman. She spent nothing to end their relevance. Even fashion magazines turned. Vogue Italia ran a blistering op-ed, "When fashion fails to evolve, it becomes satire of itself." Delacour's stock dropped 13% in 48 hours. Luxury retailers pulled scheduled collaborations. A former brand ambassador resigned live on a fashion panel. "I will never represent a house that disrespects dignity." Lucien issued a statement 2 days later, reading, "Our intention was misunderstood. We regret any offense caused." The statement was promptly shredded by public opinion. Naomi, on the other hand, declined to comment. When pressed by reporters, she only said, "I didn't come here to be acknowledged. I came to help build something better." And build she did. In the wake of the Delacourt disaster, 5 more luxury brands quietly reached out to the Elitaire Fund, requesting partnerships for their internal culture reviews. International fashion schools invited Naomi to guest lecture. Parisian design students created a collection called Grace in Motion, inspired entirely by her restraint. But Naomi kept her focus clear. "It's not about me," she told her team during a strategy meeting. "It's about ensuring the next woman in linen walks into any room without having to prove herself." 3 weeks later in Tokyo, Naomi launched the Dignity Index, an annual ranking of companies based on customer experience, class-based profiling, and inclusion. Think Fortune 500 meets human decency. Within 48 hours, it went viral. Consumers demanded their favorite brands take the pledge. Retailers scrambled to make the list. Celebrities began posting photos in plain clothes with the caption "#, dignity first." And for the first time, Maison Delacour wasn't mentioned in trend reports. They were mentioned in apologies. Meanwhile, Naomi's tote bag, still simple, still linen, was auctioned for charity. The final bid? $3.1 million. All proceeds went to build the Elitaire Leadership Academy, a hybrid learning center and mentorship program for underserved women and girls across 3 continents. The Academy's motto? Enter as you are. Julian stood by Naomi's side through every stage of the journey, offering support, quiet counsel, and laughter when she needed it most. At night, they sat on their balcony, sipping tea and watching the city lights blink like sequins across the skyline. One evening, after a long board meeting and a dozen interviews, Julian looked at her and said, "They mocked your linen. Now they want to borrow your thread." Naomi laughed, truly laughed, and shook her head. "They can have it," she said. "I've got more." And she did. Not more diamonds, not more gowns, more purpose, more people standing behind her. More doors she'd opened, not with fame, but with grace. "Please state your name for the record." Naomi Ellis sat straight-backed in the witness chair before the United States Congressional Subcommittee on Corporate Ethics and Consumer Protection. Her tote bag rested beside her on the hardwood floor. Her navy blazer was crisp, her white blouse pristine, but she hadn't come dressed for a show. She'd come armed with truth. "Naomi Elizabeth Ellis," she said clearly, her voice steady and warm. The hearing chamber was packed. Lawmakers, reporters, spectators. A gallery filled with women in plain linen shirts and canvas totes. A silent show of solidarity. Naomi's name had transcended the boutique scandal. Her testimony today wasn't about a necklace anymore. It was about the rights of every person who had ever walked into a room and been told, without a word, that they didn't belong. The chairwoman, Representative Dolores Grant of Maryland, adjusted her glasses and leaned in. "Miss Ellis," she said, "you were publicly profiled, humiliated, and accused of theft based on your appearance. What would you like this committee to understand from your experience?" Naomi didn't blink. "That it wasn't just me," she said. "What happened that day in the boutique wasn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern, a system. We've taught entire industries that wealth wears a uniform, and anyone who steps out of that uniform is suspect. I want to change that, not just in boutiques but in boardrooms, showrooms, and classrooms." A murmur of assent rippled through the audience. Naomi opened her folder. She'd brought receipts, not metaphors, real documents. Testimonies from over 8,000 consumers who had experienced some form of class-based or racial profiling in luxury or professional spaces. Statements from former employees of high-end retailers and fashion brands who'd been instructed to profile quietly. Internal memos, hiring biases, surveillance policies, all catalogued by the Elitaire Fund's research division. Naomi handed the folder to the chairwoman. "These are the voices I'm carrying today," she said. "Not just mine." What no one knew was that Naomi wasn't the only witness that day. From the back of the chamber, a young man in a charcoal suit stood up slowly. His name was David Kim, a former marketing analyst at Maison Elitaire's corporate office. He'd left quietly 6 months earlier, citing burnout. But that wasn't the truth. He had seen too much. Emails, internal strategy decks, profiling guides literally titled The Buyer Blueprint that categorized customers by appearance, accent, and accessories. He stepped to the microphone with shaking hands and began reading. "I was told to flag shoppers with worn shoes," he said, voice cracking. "I was told linen was a non-spender fabric. I watched my superiors mock surveillance footage of Naomi Ellis and share it on internal Slack channels with laughing emojis." Gasps filled the room. Naomi closed her eyes briefly, grief washing over her not for herself, but for every person who had ever been laughed at behind a closed door. David's voice broke again. "I didn't say anything then. I'm sorry, but I'm here now." Naomi looked up at him and offered a quiet nod of thanks. Nothing more was needed. The testimony went viral before Naomi even left the building. Clips of her speech flooded every news outlet, from CNN to TikTok. #sword, Ellis testimony, half from tote to truth, we wear linen too. Within 48 hours, members of Congress drafted the Respect in Commerce Act, a bill that would require large retail and service companies to undergo bias audits, publish consumer equality reports, and offer verified anti-discrimination training to all front-facing staff. Several corporations, eager to avoid becoming the next Maison Elitaire, immediately endorsed it. Brands like Nordstrom, Apple, Sephora, and even Gucci signed open letters pledging support. Maison Elitaire, by contrast, went full silence. Their social media pages were dormant. Their corporate offices closed for restructuring. But the silence didn't shield them from what came next. 1 week later, the New York Times published an exposé. Title: The Hidden Culture of Contempt, Inside Maison Elitaire's Profiling Playbook. David Kim's documents were now public record. The article exposed layers of abuse, from whistleblower suppression to covert client scoring systems, all designed to filter clientele by economic appearance and disruption risk. The most damning detail? A confidential document dated 6 months before Naomi's visit titled Brand Preservation Protocol, which read, "Avoid time-wasting interactions with patrons exhibiting sub-elegant attire, especially linen, cotton totes, flat sandals. Engagement metrics show low conversion rates. Direct to accessory displays or politely delay service until they leave." It was signed by Raphael Verona, the very owner who had claimed the store's actions were a misunderstanding. Public reaction was swift. Protests erupted outside Maison Elitaire's last standing boutique in Miami. Former clients returned their merchandise in silent protest. One elderly woman placed a single white linen scarf inside a shopping bag and left it on their doorstep. Over the course of a weekend, their final 3 locations shut down. Maison Elitaire was officially defunct, but Naomi had no interest in celebrating. "I don't want them gone," she said in a televised interview. "I want them better. But if they can't be better, then they shouldn't be in business." That interview reached 60 million viewers. It became the most watched segment in primetime news for that quarter. And yet, Naomi remained unchanged. Still walked to her office when she could. Still replied to letters personally. Still wore the same pair of sandals from that day, their leather now weathered but intact. When asked by a student during a university lecture why she never changed her look, Naomi smiled. "Because I didn't fail to belong that day," she said. "They failed to recognize what belonging looks like." The Respect in Commerce Act passed in the House with overwhelming bipartisan support. In the Senate, it sparked heated debates, some scoffing that profiling is subjective, others defending the sanctity of free enterprise. But Naomi once again, didn't fight fire with fire. She sent handwritten notes to every undecided senator. She invited them to visit elitaire fund training centers. She introduced them to real people with real stories. By the end of the month, the bill passed, signed into law on the steps of the Capitol. Naomi stood beside President Thompson as she signed the bill with a navy blue pen and handed it to her with a smile. "Thank you for reminding us who we serve," the president said. Naomi simply nodded. "Thank you for listening." The elitaire fund celebrated quietly. No champagne, no parties, just a gathering in their Manhattan office where they unveiled the new Scholar Spotlight wall. Photos of young women who had received grants, started businesses, returned to school, and walked into interviews without changing who they were. Julian surprised Naomi by hanging a photo of her beside them, not the museum portrait or the congressional hearing photo, but a candid image. Naomi seated at the original fund launch, tote bag in her lap, eyes bright with quiet hope. She laughed softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I told you I'd get mileage out of that tote," she whispered to Julian. He grinned. "It's the most powerful accessory in history." And still, Naomi didn't stop, because her mission wasn't just about making noise. It was about changing norms. She wasn't building a brand, she was building a blueprint. One where grace could go further than gold, where character outshined couture, where the next girl in linen would walk into any room, any office, any country, and be seen not as an imposter, but as enough. "She's not just an advocate," the voice hissed through a closed boardroom door in Zurich. "She's a threat." The men seated around the polished mahogany table exchanged uneasy glances. On the wall behind them glowed a projection of Naomi Ellis's face from her UN speech, composed, dignified, and viral. Beside her photo, another headline blared: "Naomi Ellis named most influential woman in global retail reform." Forbes. But these weren't retail CEOs or policymakers. These were the men who profited from what Naomi had started to dismantle. Private luxury consortium leaders, lobbyists from fashion monopolies, CEOs of exclusive clubs and closed-door organizations where power wasn't measured in integrity, but in control. "She's rewritten the rules," growled one executive. "Consumers are watching how we treat people. Our gatekeeping is the brand." "Worse," said another, "our own staff are quoting her at meetings." The solution came quickly, cold, strategic, and well-funded. Discredit her, or dilute her. Naomi felt the ripple before it reached her. It began with a flattering feature, too flattering. A glossy European magazine hailed her as the savior of modern civility. Then came a fashion spread. Then an invite to speak at a global luxury summit hosted by the same legacy brands that once refused to let her through the door. Julian raised a brow when the emails came in. "Did they ever apologize?" "No," Naomi said softly, reading the invite again. "They're not apologizing, they're adapting." The summit offer came with conditions: exclusive brand partnerships, a 7-figure honorarium, and most importantly, the elitaire fund would be folded under a new global initiative, led by an emerging figure named Celeste Beaumont, a media darling known for repackaging social causes into sellable campaigns. Naomi knew the name. Everyone did. Celeste wore philanthropy like perfume, just enough to seem generous, never enough to offend donors. Her initiative, Gilded Voices, was rapidly expanding. But unlike Naomi, Celeste didn't believe in calling out systems. She believed in polishing them. When they finally met, it was at a neutral venue in Geneva. Celeste arrived draped in gold silks, a diamond-encrusted clutch dangling from her wrist. Her smile was perfect, studied, practiced, empty. "I admire what you've built," she purred. "Truly, you've changed the conversation." Naomi watched her carefully. "I didn't change the conversation. I just made space for voices that were always speaking." Celeste leaned forward. "Imagine what we could do together. My reach, your story. We could rebrand this whole movement, make it palatable for everyone." Naomi's gray eyes sharpened. "Palatable?" she echoed. "Is that what dignity should be?" Celeste waved her hand dismissively. "Naomi, come on. The anger thing, it's good for headlines, but it's not sustainable. People want aspiration, not confrontation." Naomi stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain herself. She simply picked up her tote, offered Celeste the kind of polite smile reserved for closed doors, and left. Some revolutions don't need rebranding. But the smear campaign began almost immediately. Anonymous articles started appearing on gossip blogs, Is Naomi Ellis too powerful? The secret elitism of a humility icon. Does she even want equality, or just influence? Old photos were misused. Tweets were twisted. Rumors circulated that the Elitaire Fund was gatekeeping opportunity, cultivating its own elite, and ignoring men. One fabricated headline even claimed Naomi had demanded a dress code for new fund recipients, directly contradicting everything she had ever stood for. The goal was clear. If they couldn't control her, they would confuse the public, make her message blurry, make the movement seem hypocritical, and then offer a more polished, controllable alternative. Celeste, Naomi's board met that week. The room was tense. "We're being shadowboxed," said her communications lead. "Celeste is offering funding to our partners if they leave and join her initiative." "She's poaching staff," said another, "and they're promising press coverage we can't match." The younger members were angry. The older ones were cautious. Naomi listened. Then she stood and walked to the whiteboard. She drew 2 words, soul, scale. "We're at the crossroads," she said. "We can scale, take every offer, partner with everyone who drops our name and dilute what we're trying to do. Or we protect the soul of this work, and yes, it may mean we grow slower. Or stand alone, but we'll still be ourselves." Silence filled the room. Then Julian spoke, from the corner where he'd been quietly taking notes. "Movements don't fail because they're small," he said. "They fail when they forget what made them matter." The vote was unanimous. No to the partnerships, no to the summit, and definitely no to Gilded Voices. The fallout came fast. 3 brands pulled their public endorsements under pressure from Celeste's camp. Several influencers once vocal in support of Naomi switched sides, citing fresh perspectives and evolving values. A tabloid ran the headline, "Naomi Ellis, from icon to isolation," and still Naomi didn't react publicly. But her supporters did. A young designer in Lagos posted a thread. She turned down $1 billion alliance because it asked her to stop speaking truth. That's not isolation, that's integrity. A poet in London tweeted, "If Naomi stands alone, we stand with her. One by one, if we must." The hashtag #StandWithNaomi trended in over a dozen countries. A viral video emerged showing scholarship recipients around the world holding their tote bags, saying one by one, "She gave me dignity. She saw me. She didn't ask me to be palatable. She asked me to be powerful." And then something happened. Celeste and her backers hadn't expected. A whistleblower from Gilded Voices came forward. A former strategist released emails showing internal plan to neutralize Naomi Ellis's influence by launching a competing initiative with mass branding, media saturation, and pre-written talking points for influencers. The goal? Flood the space until we become the default voice of civility reform. The revelation shattered Gilded Voices' credibility. Several donors pulled out. Celeste's PR team resigned. She issued an apology that landed with a thud. "I regret the miscommunication." But no one was listening anymore. Naomi wasn't just vindicated, she was proven right. But she didn't celebrate. Instead, she quietly visited a girls' school in Detroit funded by the Elitaire Fund. She met with young black girls learning code, writing business pitches, building dreams. One of them asked her, "Do you ever feel like giving up?" Naomi knelt beside her, looked her in the eye and said, "Sometimes. But then I remember I'm not building a brand, I'm building a bridge." Later that night, in her garden in Brooklyn, Julian found her barefoot, watering the lavender. He wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed the top of her head. "They tried to replace you," he said, "but they couldn't." Naomi leaned back against his chest. "They didn't want to replace me," she whispered. "They wanted to replace the truth. But the truth has a funny way of surviving." "Are you sure you don't want to deliver the keynote?" her assistant asked, adjusting the collar of her blazer. "They've already printed your name on the final program." Naomi Ellis smiled gently, glancing out the window of the auditorium's green room. Hundreds of young women were filing into the seats below. Students, professionals, artists, entrepreneurs. They came from every corner of the world, many of them carrying the signature canvas tote that had become more than a bag. It was a badge, a statement. A quiet revolution. "I've said what I needed to say," Naomi replied. "Today, I want them to speak." Her voice was calm, but her heart was full. Because today wasn't about Naomi. Today was about the future. The event was called the Bridge Forum, the culmination of 2 years of planning and global collaboration. More than a conference, it was the launch of a global digital and real-world network that would connect women across industries, regions, and languages to share resources, legal support, mentorship, and power. It was Naomi's most ambitious project yet, and her most selfless one. The Bridge platform would be community-owned, multilingual, and entirely decentralized. No ads, no gatekeepers, just access, support, and equity. More than 40 countries had already pledged policy support, several universities had signed on as partners, and over 300,000 users had pre-registered before the platform's official launch. It was the next chapter of the Elitaire Fund, and Naomi wouldn't be the face of it. She would be the roots. The crowd hushed as the lights dimmed. On stage stood a new leader, Soraya Dawes, a former scholarship recipient and now the inaugural director of the Bridge platform. At just 29, she had already earned a law degree, taken on 2 major corporations in class action lawsuits, and written a best-selling book on economic gatekeeping. But today, she stood in a simple black jumpsuit and flat shoes, her voice unshakable. I'm standing here today because someone once looked at me, not for what I wore or what I could afford, but for what I could build. She turned toward Naomi, who sat in the front row, her hands clasped quietly in her lap. She built a bridge for us. Today, we cross it. Applause erupted. Naomi blinked away tears. Julian reached over, gently squeezed her hand. That evening, as the crowd celebrated and young women lined up for photos with Soraya and the new board, Naomi slipped away from the main hall. She found a quiet spot on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights shimmered across the skyline like fallen stars waiting to be claimed. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. You always loved being behind the scenes, said a soft voice behind her. Naomi turned, startled, then smiled. It was Camilla Porter, her childhood best friend, the one who used to sneak peanut butter sandwiches into her lunchbox when she couldn't afford the cafeteria. The one she hadn't spoken to in nearly 15 years, not since a falling out over a college scholarship Naomi had declined and Camilla had misunderstood. They hugged, longer than expected. No words at first, just the quiet weight of history melting between them. I watched everything, Camilla whispered. I was too proud to reach out, too ashamed. But when my daughter saw you on TV and said, Mom, she looks like me, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Naomi felt a tremor in her chest. I'm sorry I disappeared, Camilla said. You didn't deserve that. Naomi shook her head gently. Neither did you. They sat together side by side watching the next generation inside the hall take selfies, trade contacts, plan campaigns. You always built bridges, Camilla murmured, even when people were too proud to walk across. Naomi smiled, and for the first time in months she allowed herself to just be. Not the icon, not the founder, not the leader, just Naomi. Over the next weeks, the Bridge platform's reach exploded. Teachers in the Philippines used it to share lesson plans on gender equality. Midwives in Uganda used it to access emergency legal advice about hospital discrimination. Startups in Atlanta, Jakarta, and Nairobi collaborated through it to build cross-border women-led companies. A university in Stockholm offered full scholarships to the top-ranked platform contributors. An indigenous community in Canada launched a podcast series hosted on the platform, retelling oral histories of women who had resisted colonial gatekeeping for generations. And through it all, Naomi stayed present, but distant. She answered emails from mentees, she contributed to panels quietly, but she never stepped forward to reclaim the spotlight, because the light now belonged to everyone. Celeste Beaumont, watching from the sidelines, issued a formal apology during an interview with The Guardian. It was carefully worded, tearfully delivered, and quickly critiqued as performative. I misjudged what this movement meant, she said, and I tried to brand what wasn't mine to brand. But by then, the public had already moved on. Because Naomi had never needed to retaliate, she had simply outgrown the noise. One afternoon, Naomi received a letter handwritten, delivered by courier. She recognized the name instantly. Raphael Verona, the former owner of Maison Elitaire, the man who once allowed his staff to publicly humiliate her in front of dozens. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a simple note. I sold the last of my properties. I've started volunteering at a shelter in Leon. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I owe you the truth. Your grace broke something in me, and then it built something better. Thank you. RV Naomi folded the letter quietly and placed it in her desk drawer. She didn't need to reply. She didn't need to gloat. Some justice is quiet. Some closure comes not in revenge, but in reflection. Months later, Naomi and Julian returned to Montauk, where the old photo in her tote had first been taken 10 years earlier. They stood on the beach barefoot, hand in hand. "I keep thinking of the necklace," Julian said softly. "That moment, that firestorm." Naomi smiled faintly. "It was never about the necklace." "I know," he replied. "It was about the weight of being seen." She leaned her head against his shoulder, waves crashing softly at their feet. "I don't want to carry the torch forever," she admitted, "but I think it's in good hands now." Julian nodded. "And you?" Naomi looked out at the horizon, sun dipping low. "I built the bridge," she said. "Now, maybe it's time I walk across it too." "Naomi," the voice came over the phone, low and urgent. "We've got a problem." It was Soraya Dawes, now acting CEO of both the BILLIONAIRE Fund and the Bridge platform. She rarely used those words. She was calm under fire, steady. But Naomi could hear it. Beneath her polished tone, something trembled. "There's a company, an AI retail startup out of Singapore. They've been using our name, our message, even the tote." Soraya hesitated. "They're calling it the new bridge." Naomi exhaled softly. She wasn't surprised. The movement had grown beyond borders, languages, and screens. With reach came risk. Opportunists had tried before, but this one was different. This was the first time someone had stolen the symbol. The company's ads had started appearing on social media, glossy, sleek videos featuring women in linen dresses smiling as they scanned their faces at boutique entrances. AI-generated assistants tailored their shopping experience based on empowerment profiles. On the surface, it sounded progressive, but behind the curtain, data mining, surveillance, corporate profiling rebranded as personalization. Naomi's image had been used in a mock-up without permission. Her story twisted into marketing. She wore linen and walked into history, the ad said. "Now you can too, with Bridge Plus." Julian saw it first. He stormed into the living room, laptop in hand. "This isn't just unethical," he snapped. "It's theft. They're turning your work into a cash grab." Naomi watched the ad once, then again, and then she closed the laptop. "They don't understand," she murmured. "They think the tote made the change. They think the linen was the revolution, but it was never about the bag. It was about the choice to carry it anyway." The board urged her to respond publicly. Advisors begged her to sue. But Naomi didn't do either, not immediately. Instead, she went back to the beginning. She visited the first BILLIONAIRE Fund office, a modest space above a community center in the Bronx. She sat in the same chair where she once took handwritten letters and filed scholarship applications herself. And there, she wrote something again. Not a speech, not a press release, a letter. It was titled, "To the Ones Who Will Carry It Next." And then she stepped away from the spotlight. 3 days later, Soraya held a press conference. She stood at the front of a packed room. Journalists from 5 continents, activists, fund partners, youth leaders. "Naomi Ellis is not issuing a personal statement," Soraya said, "because this isn't about her anymore, and that's exactly how she planned it." Then, she read the letter aloud, "To the ones who will carry it next. I always knew there would be imitators. Rebrands. Those who would use the surface and sell it as the soul. They'll copy the linen, the tote, the language. They'll call it empowerment, but package it in profit. And when they do, you'll have to decide. Do you wear the message, or do you live it? Because real dignity doesn't sell data. Real equity doesn't scan your face before deciding your worth. Real change doesn't happen when you are approved. It happens when you are simply present. So to those who carry this forward, know this. The tote is not the revolution. You are. Let the next girl walk into that room. Let her be underestimated. Let them laugh. Then let her build the next bridge. And when they ask who she is, tell them she didn't need diamonds to shine. She was the light. The room fell still. Some cried. Others applauded. The letter went viral within the hour. Naomi never appeared on screen, never issued a soundbite. But her words became a rallying cry. The Bridge Platform's team launched a new global code of ethics for tech partnerships, the Naomi Protocol, barring any surveillance-based systems from being labeled as empowerment tools. Over 300 companies signed on within the week. Bridge Plus collapsed under public scrutiny. Investors pulled out. The founder issued a hasty statement. We misunderstood the spirit of the movement. No one bought it. Naomi's silence was louder than their apology. 6 months passed. Naomi quietly passed the formal title of Chairwoman Emerita to Soraya, then left New York with Julian. They moved to a quiet lake town in Vermont. No press, no interviews. She taught creative writing at a local college, grew lavender, spent time on the porch, reading the letters that still came, every week at least a dozen more. I stood up to my boss. I opened a clinic in my mother's village. I wore my linen dress to a courtroom, and I won. She read each one. She wrote back when she could. She kept the originals in a hand-sewn binder, titled The Bridge Carriers. One crisp October morning, a knock came at the door. A young girl, maybe 16, stood nervously on the porch, clutching a slightly frayed canvas tote. Naomi opened the door and smiled. "Hi," the girl said, her voice trembling. "You don't know me, but I'm here because of what you made, and I don't know what comes next, but I want to help build it." Naomi stepped aside and gestured her in. "Come in, love," she said gently. "Let's talk." Epilogue. 2 years later, a new generation gathered for the first global bridge assembly. No red carpet, no spotlights, just thousands of women in seats, in circles, on rooftops, in churches, in classrooms, sharing ideas, passing resources, lifting each other. They spoke 42 languages. They came from 83 countries, and every single one of them carried something that didn't glitter. A book, a pen, a photo, a worn canvas tote. There were no statues of Naomi, no monuments, just one plaque on the wall of the original Elitaire Fund office. It read, "She didn't build an empire. She built a door." And then she held it open. To everyone watching this story, remember, Naomi never raised her voice, but she changed the world. Not with revenge, not with power plays, but with quiet dignity, unshakable grace, and the refusal to be defined by the bag on her shoulder or the fabric on her back. She didn't need diamonds to shine. She was the light. If this story moved you, share it. Let the next woman who's underestimated, ignored, or mocked know she is not alone. She is more than enough. And her walk into the room might just change it forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below, because voices like Naomi's build bridges that last.